Now it's time to start creating the commands in our command design pattern example. And these commands, such as shut down Asia, reboot Asia, run diagnostics Asia, and so forth, will be able to handle the receivers, Asia server, Euro server, US server, and the client code will be the invoker. It's going to invoke the commands. So now it's time to create these individual command classes so that you can work with the commands when they're being invoked by the invoker on the receivers. Okay, so let's start creating these commands. I'm going to begin, since we're going to create a number of commands, we're going to begin by creating an interface to make sure you have a consistent interface across all the commands. The interface will be called command, and it's just going to contain a method called execute. So all of our commands are going to have an execute method. So when you load them into the invoker, all you have to do is run their execute method and they'll do their thing on the receiver that they're designed to work with. Okay, so that is the interface for the command objects for the command classes, and it's going to have one method, the execute method. So all the commands have to implement an execute method. So for example, look at the shutdown command. This is the shutdown command class. It implements the command interface, and in the constructor for the command, you're going to pass the receiver object to the constructor of the command. It's going to store the receiver inside the command object. That way you have a shutdown command class. You can create shutdown command Asia, shutdown command Euro, and so forth. You can create different commands for the different receivers based all on one particular class. That's the shutdown command class. And when you create the objects, that's when you create a different object for Asia and different object for the European server and so forth. And the way that that is customized is that you pass the actual receiver object to the command's constructor, and that receiver object is stored. Now you have the receiver object stored, and you can run the receiver object's methods if you want in this command. For example, in the shutdown command, I'm going to take a look at the execute method. The execute method is how you get the command to actually run and do its thing, and it's going to call the receiver's connect method to connect to the web server. Going to run it the shutdown command, and it's going to disconnect from the receiver and then print out a line so that the output will be separated from the output of the other commands you're running as well, just on the screen, just to make things pretty. But the idea is that you store the receiver inside the command object, or object corresponding to the receiver inside the command object, and then when it's time to execute the command, all you have to do is you use the receiver object's various methods like this, and that's how you encapsulate things. This particular command runs three methods, as you see here, and these three methods are methods that you don't have to now execute individually. Instead, all you do is you use a loaded command object into the invoker and then call its execute method. The execute method then executes those three methods in sequence. And of course, it could be more than three methods. It could be 20. It could be 200 methods. So that's the idea of creating tools, that is command objects, that you can just load into the invoker and call its execute method to execute what it's supposed to do, to execute the methods it's supposed to do. Here's the run diagnostics command. Also implements the command interface. Also stores the receiver like this. That's the web server object, like that. And then in the execute method, you connect, you run diagnostics, then you disconnect. So that is the run diagnostics command class. Once again, you're going to create a run diagnostics command object and customize it for the Asia server, the Euro server, the US server, whatever. And by passing the receiver object to the command object where it's stored, and then used the methods of that stored receiver object are called when you call the execute method of the command. And then that means that you're going to only need one class of the run diagnostics command, and you can create different objects, one object for each of the servers. Similarly, there is the reboot command, which looks like this. And as you've seen before, the reboot command is going to have a constructor you pass the receiver to. The receiver object is stored, and the execute method you connect, here you boot, and you disconnect. So those three methods are now all wrapped into one. You don't have to remember which one and which order they are supposed to be called. And that creates our command objects. And so now we have the receiver objects and we have the command objects. And the next step is to create the invoker, which is the code that actually loads the command objects in and calls their execute method in order to get them to do something. So that's coming up next, creating the invoker.